Welcome everyone to Defining Zionism. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. My name is Stephanie Z. Bonder, and I am president of Hadassah, Northern New Jersey. And I want to welcome everyone to this installment of Defining Zionism in the 21st Century. Now we are live from Congregation Beth El in South Orange, New Jersey. If there's anyone joining us who hasn't joined our series before, let me explain Hadassah's Defining Zionism series, because it was developed to create a welcoming opportunity for everyone to explore Zionism through a variety of perspectives. As we have heard throughout this series, there are many different definitions of Zionism, and we don't all agree. But the goal of our program is to create a safe space so that we can have these open conversations and really explore different perspectives of Zionism in a respectful and constructive way. So we do ask that you listen and be respectful during this conversation, both in your commenting and questions today, as well as when you continue the conversation online and in your local community. As a reminder, we encourage you to ask questions via the live stream chat box. Please register through live stream if that function is not already enabled on your computers. We have provided index cards for those of you in our audience, so you may print your questions for the presenter, and we'll collect them. I will be asking the presenter all the questions. In addition, please be mindful of the fact that any noise in this room is picked up by the recording equipment, so we ask that you not shuffle papers or whisper to your neighbor. It will be distracting to those watching the live recording to hear both the presenter and the moderator. We are so pleased to have Nomi Colton-Max with us today. Nomi is a foreign policy analyst of the Middle East and a founder of Amenu. Amenu in Hebrew means our people. It is a national, multi-generational community of progressive Jews in North America. Amenu recognizes the unbreakable bond between the Jewish people and the State of Israel and stands for the commitment to make our own society better. Amenu recognizes that as Zionists, we understand that a secure peace between Israel and its neighbors is essential to the survival of a democratic Jewish state. Tonight, Nomi will be talking about Progressive Zionism, the most important discussion for the next generation of North American leadership. Nomi has been trained as a foreign policy analyst specializing in the Arab world and the Persian Gulf. She is a proud progressive Zionist. She grew up in Canada, and both her professional and personal development have been centered on Israel and the Middle East. Nomi is currently president of Congregation Beth El in South Orange, New Jersey. She is a longtime member of Amenu, having served as an executive member for several years. Please note that the opinions of our presenters cover a wide spectrum of ideologies. Hadassah prides itself on being a pluralistic organization that does not align itself with any specific stream of Judaism or any political party. We support the democratically elected government of Israel. The opinions expressed are those of the presenters, and Hadassah does not endorse any particular viewpoint. So, Nomi, thank you for joining us. We welcome you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I brought my action figure of Herzl because I figured if there was ever a place that Theodore Herzl should be, it was on a series on Zionism. So I want to thank you, Stephanie, and I want to thank Hadassah for inviting me to be part of this important series. I've watched the earlier speakers, and it is my hope tonight that my involvement will help educate, inspire, push folks across the country to get involved and support Israel and Zionist causes, and mostly I hope that it will encourage people to ask questions, seek new answers when they hear people talking about Israel. Before I do that, however, I do want to thank Beth El for hosting this event. I speak tonight as Nomi Colton-Max, an individual, a Zionist, and not as president of Beth El. But I know that this is a diverse congregation that welcomes discussion and differences of opinion, and that is the perfect milieu for such a safe and important discussion. And I also want to add that Rabbi Olitsky apologizes for not being able to be here, but he had a long-standing prior commitment. So tonight, I hope to answer a few questions. My definition of Zionism, which at some point along the road will also include what is not in my definition of Zionism. What is progressive Zionism, which I submit for me is how I define Zionism, and why progressive Zionism, which many in this country view as something new and arrogantly American, is as old as the state itself. And as the title of my talk suggests, while listening to what progressive Zionists say, who we work with, and what we do, we offer a way to reach many in North America who seem disengaged from Israel, and sometimes our Jewish communities in general. As Stephanie said in the introduction, I am trained as an analysis of Middle East events, but it is the fact that I am a proud Zionist that guided my entire learning career, my academic and career choices, my volunteer work, and the summer camps for my children. Like all of you here today, I celebrate Israel. I celebrate its language, its beauty, and its culture, a country that has had unbelievable successes and proud moments in the last 66 and a half years. We all know about how far Israel has come, and I'm sure you've received that email as well. You know the one, a country with less than 1/1000th of the world's population that developed the cell phone, the Pentium chip, voicemail, ingestible video camera, numbers of awards, always at war, planting more trees, and solved arid issues while working on water issues like no other country in the world. 70% of Israelis born in Israel, and a population that is now 8,059 million over where it started as 806,000 in 1948. But like all countries, Israel has domestic challenges. Yes, of course, Israel is located in a tough neighborhood that seems to be getting uglier and scarier. And yes, Israelis live with the fear of terror every single day, which we cannot dismiss. But talking about Israel must also include a discussion of poverty, religious strife, corruption of current and past leaders, immobility of government, demographics, and inequality, just to name a few. Israel does not mirror those movies that I used to see in day school where there was rikudei am in the desert. They could fry an egg on a street corner and eat it because it was just so clean, the world of milk and honey. And I'm sure you too know of people that got to Israel, had a trip, and came home and said, you know, it's not like what I pictured it. And you know what? That's okay. Israeli society faces many of the same issues that we face here. For me, as a liberal Jew who struggles with social justice, income inequality, I look at Israel and see many of these issues, and sometimes more in the extreme, but it's okay. It's okay that Israel is not perfect. And it's perfectly acceptable for you to be uncomfortable when you see that poverty that exists. In the last OECD study, Israel ranked in the top 5 member countries with the widest gap between rich and poor. The other countries, by the way, in order were Chile, Mexico, Turkey, and the United States. And it's okay that your Judaism was questioned when you landed because they doubt the authenticity of your conversion or the way that Israel is treating its asylum seekers. Why? Because if you truly love something, you love it not just for its beauty, but for its flaws. You hope that with time and with action and care, you can work to overcome or at least to improve upon its weakest parts. To me, it is this commitment, this dedication, this belief in self-help, which is what makes me proud to be a liberal, a progressive, and just as proud to be a Zionist. Growing up in a youth movement, my counselors taught me about the chalutzim, the pioneers that built communities based on ideas of equality. They spent time thinking of what they wanted in this new country and in their new yeshuvim, their settlements, where they aspired to create something, building upon the ideals, improving over what already existed that helped them create Israel. You see, my Zionism, progressive Zionism, is part of the labor Zionist and socialist Zionist tradition that had built the state. It is not new. At Machaneh, at camp, I learned about Echad Ha'am and his belief that Jews in Israel should be a light unto the other nations. It was laid out that Zionism was about tolerance of many kinds, including religion and different political views, something that many seem to currently overlook. So with that background, if I had to define Zionism in 3 points, I would say that Zionism is the belief that there should be a Jewish state. This state should also be a model of acting in fairness and dignity toward all the inhabitants of the state, Jews and non-Jews alike. I would say that striving for peace should be a central pursuit of Zionism, but its absence should not undermine the Jewish national home. Cultural and religious pluralism with Judaism, as well as openness to other cultures, will be welcome and encouraged. And I would add to these 3 points, they are inherently based upon a belief in the legitimacy of national identities and aspirations, and hence a respect for other national movements, including the Palestinians. This was the Zionism set up by Theodor Herzl, David Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, and Henrietta Salt. In fact, this is the Declaration of Independence. If you look at these paragraphs in it, you'll see they say, "The state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. It will be based upon freedom, justice, and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all of its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principle of the Charter of the United Nations." Later it says, "We appeal in the very midst of the onslaught launched against us now for months to the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel to preserve peace and participate in the upbuilding of the state on the basis of full and equal citizenship and due representation in all provisional and permanent institutions." And one other paragraph, "We extend our hand to all neighboring states and their peoples in an offer of peace and good neighborliness and appeal to them to establish bonds of cooperation and mutual help with the sovereign Jewish people settled in its own land. The state of Israel is prepared to do its share in a common effort for the advancement of the entire Middle East." Reading these parts of the Declaration of Independence are just as important today as they were in 1948. There is nothing in that conflicts with my liberal beliefs and nothing that makes me uncomfortable. It holds up in circles of social justice, women's rights, LGBTQ, among Jews and non-Jews across the religious spectrum. And yet, in November, as you may know, a draft of a new nationality bill passed the Israeli cabinet that emphasizes Israel's Jewish character above its democratic nature. Yes, Israel, like the United States, struggles to reach these ideals, and so progressive Zionists in Israel and here work with politicians, non-governmental organizations, and activists to stop such legislation and improve situations. Amenu works with Yadid, an organization devoted to community empowerment, with Nisped, which works on projects for socio and economic development and peace in the South. And we are proud of our Olim from Habonim Dror, those who have made Aliyah that work in Jewish Arab community centers in towns such as Akko. Makes sense, right? This is an easy sell for progressive Zionists to the greater Jewish community here in North America. Israeli activists and NGOs are doing innovative and important work that they will tell you came out of their belief in Zionism, progressive Zionism. So let me turn to my second tenet of Zionism. Striving for peace should be the central pursuit of Zionism, but its absence should not undermine the Jewish national home. Now, firstly, I want to be clear. Everyone wants peace. And I would argue as well that everyone would agree that Israel will be at its safest and its strongest when there's peace. But peace is not manna from heaven or snow that will just cover Israel and her neighbors one day and bring about a new age. As the expressions suggest, we must embark on a path to peace. That path is not smooth. It must be paved over time. There are always detours, and there will be obstructions. Along the way, you may discover new access points, but the path does lead somewhere. You take risks along the way that are based on calculations, both short and long term. Peace is also two-way. Someone may arrive there before the person on the other side, but at the end of the day, you need to work with someone, with a partner. As a progressive Zionist, again, I look back to the founders who wanted peace and included it in the Declaration of Independence. I look back at the actions of the last 66 and a half years, and I especially look to the developments after 1967, to what this has done for and to Israel, to settlements, the Green Line, changes in population. And yes, I also look around to what is there today. Hamas is not my friend, but a terrorist organization, and I don't like Abbas all the time. And I continue to work and still support a two-state solution. The different plans that exist, the new push by the Arab countries, that, of course, is a whole standalone presentation. And I'm going to wait to talk a little bit in my question and answer about what exactly I would talk about, even on the bare minimum. But just let's say that, yes, I work for it, I want it, and I think it will happen. But for tonight, I want to point to a few reasons as to why I see this as the only long-term solution. The first view by now should be clear. It is because of my commitment to social justice. The status quo is untenable, and it will only continue to hurt Israel. The third is something that I have not yet touched upon, and that is that Israel has a demography problem. And it is this issue that can bring about the end to an opinion that will bring about the end of the Zionist state. We're not talking 20 or 30 years out. If we include the occupied territories, Jews will become a minority in their own country. Now, I know that often we hear people say to us, to support Israel, that it is an apartheid state, and it is not. However, these numbers tell a very unsettling story. Within Israel proper, the Jewish population is about 75.4% Jewish. Israeli census statistics say that the Jewish population between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River is now 5.9 million of the 12 million people living under Israeli rule. Now, if you talk about estimates of close to 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank, I will let you do the math. But let me say what is obvious. I do not like what these numbers hold for my Zionism and my Israel. And so I need to move past the status quo. So path 2. This is the one that you will hear from the far left, the anti-Zionist far left. This option truly calls for a binational state, an Israel without Zionism, a country where two peoples live together under one government. Palestinians and Israelis are equal. I guess a modern post-nationalistic state. Now, not only do I think that this is even more untenable than peace in the Middle East, but I don't think it's an option because it will lead to a whole new level of all the things that Zionism was set out not to make happen. To the assimilation, to not having a country, to not having a place, to Jews without one homeland, without a raison d'etre, a lost people. So what does that leave? Well, for me, it leads back to what I've been working for since I was the same age as my oldest child. When I come home from summer camp, younger actually, and could explain to my parents that peace with Egypt will never be enough, that a two-state solution is the only way for Israel to reach its zenith. Only here can housing policy not be political. Only here can we really focus on the domestic agenda. And only here will our military once again become an army. Do I think that this is easy? Obviously not. And history continues to demonstrate how difficult it is. Do I think that the Palestinians, the Arabs, and the Iranians will love us and respect us once this has happened? Positively not. But you don't make peace with your friends. And I believe that this is the only viable solution. And until many leaders in the Jewish community here, and some in Israel, accept this argument, we will continue to see more North American Jews becoming disengaged from the Israel that we all hold so dear. Why? Well, sitting here in South Orange, New Jersey is the perfect place for this conversation. See, my town of South Orange, my extended town of South Orange and Maplebud, is a pretty progressive place. 83% of my town voted for Barack Obama in the last election. It is racially diverse. It's home to many gay and lesbian families. It has a large Jewish population. It's economically diverse as well. And let's face it, we choose to live here because we want a backyard and we cannot afford to find the Mullen Park Slope. So this weekend in South Orange, many did attend the Martin Luther King Jr. program put on by the South Orange Maplewood Coalition on Race. Because these are the things that we do in South Orange and Maplewood. We send our children, our well-educated and public and private school children, to volunteer. Perhaps they work on housing or they volunteer at a food bank. And slowly they become involved in social justice issues around the world that they live in. And then we send them off to university. And there, somewhere at university, our socially activist children go off to meet other socially activist children. They might be sitting in a room talking about problems in the world and issues facing women. They may be talking about Nigeria. And somewhere along the way, the plight of the Palestinians, those Palestinians that have been butchered by the Israelis, enters the conversation. You look around. Wait a second. That's not how I think of it. That's not what I hear of it in my pretty politically correct but safe town. You start to quietly ask questions, and someone says to you, well, Israel's an apartheid state. Someone says to you that there's going to be a boycott of all Israeli goods, and they want you to sign the petition. You hear that Israeli academics are being banned from attending a symposium. What do you do? What do you say? Where do you go? So you turn to Hillel on campus and you ask for help. You look to places around. You see other Jews that you've seen at a Shabbat dinner. What do you do? What do you say? They don't want to talk about those questions. They don't want to give you an answer. They tell you they're anti-Semitic. They dismiss it outright. It's just not true. You're not in the right place. You need to be with us. But what do you say to your friend that called Operation Cast Lead a brutality? What do you say to your roommate who you seem to get on every other issue except Israel? Your child's stuck. Your child turns inward. They stop talking about it. They stop going to Jewish events. But places do exist to help this person. We, Amenu, exist to answer these questions. The world is not black and white. It's a lesson that's tough for us to learn as adults, and it's always tough, and it always will be. Nuance is difficult. What do you say to those BDS supporters? This is what you say. You say that there are groups within Israel that are working for peace. You say that they are working within Israel, but there are even groups that work with those in Gaza. You talk about Sameret Samir, who lives in Nativ HaAsara, the closest community to the Gaza Strip, who runs a project called Path to Peace, or Kol Acher, Saut El Aher, promoting creative, non-violent, long-term solutions to the security crisis and hope for the region's residents. A friend that's just returned from Israel talked to me about the level of PTSD that impacts their everyday life. It's real. It's an issue. They face it. But they are still working for this peace. You also say to them that boycotts weaken the work of the groups on the left as they undermine progressive forces in Israel, and that groups that are working for social justice and human rights are those that will be most impacted. You add that BTF plays into the hands of the right-wingers in Israel who cultivate an us against them, Israel versus the world mentality. You add that with Israel's strong and stable economy, BDS will take much longer to impact change than working in other ways to support peace. You calmly point out that there is guilt on both sides, and BDS puts the blame on Israel only. And lastly, you state that many of the groups leading this charge are not calling for divestment, but for the disappearance of the State of Israel. If this is the case, it's true they are not your friends, and they have a different agenda entirely. When your student comes home for Passover and asks about the Palestinians that are having a hard time in the Galilee, you tell them it's true. They fight inequality every day. But you quote Supreme Court Justice Eliakim Rubinstein, who said that everyone that wants to preserve Israel as a democratic and Jewish state must strive to achieve full equality for Arab Israelis. You mentioned Kiyum Meshutaf, a coexistence initiative with Dror Israel and local youth in the Arab village of Kfar Manda. And when they ask about Hebron, you tell them about breaking the silence made up of former soldiers and reservists who tell the story of what they describe as the realities of what serving as an occupying soldier means in terms of human rights issues for both the occupied and the occupiers. But let us also remember that someone else can be disaffected by those on the right of the political spectrum. Perhaps your aunt commented when she just returned from Israel on the shrinking women's side at the Western Wall. Well, then tell her more about the plight of women in Israel, both the secular and the religious. Show her pictures from those that participate on the Freedom Ride through Jerusalem that says that women do not sit at the back of the bus. Share the Facebook announcement this week of Bezutan, the Haredi Women's Party that was just announced to make change. Or talk about the happenings in Beit Shemesh. Tell your young feminist about the excellent role model of Stav Shafir, the youngest female Knesset member who's outspoken for demanding fiscal oversight of settlement funding and supporting a wide array of social justice related Israel, from affordable housing for all young Israelis, and be proud to tell her that she now sits fourth on the combined labor Hatnuah list, meaning that there are 2 women in the top 4. It is these people, these organizations, and these causes that can excite and engage North American Jews that are walking away. These progressive Zionists that I want educating my children when they go on Israel programs. It is these progressive Zionists that I want working and talking in our afternoon and day schools. I am sure that you have many questions, and of course there is much more that I could say, but let me just end with this. I have told you about my Zionism, my progressive Zionism, and I have told you why I think it is such a valuable role to be played both here and the offerings that are being spearheaded in Israel. But I also want to tell you what Zionism is not. Zionism does not entail accepting without criticism or endorsing all the decisions and policies of Israel's elected government. Zionism does not mean and should not mean that only Jews should be allowed to live in the Jewish state as equal citizens. Zionism does not mean and should not mean that the political authority of the Jewish state should apply to the whole of Eretz Israel. A Jewish state will not be just or stable without a Jewish majority. Palestinians also have the right to self-determination in part of their homeland. Zionism does not belong to the right. They cannot hijack it. I will not be called an Israel hater, nor an Arab lover. I'm a Zionist. And I have a 5th one, too, one that is a child growing up in a Zionist youth movement. It was not what we were told, but it's what I've come to realize is very important in the world we live in today. Zionists do not have to just live in Israel. They have much work to do and a great role to play throughout the diaspora. They work to spread the important work of what's going on in Israel. They help support it financially. They help educate both politicians and neighbors about Israel. And for just as Herzl said, and here I'm purposely quoting something that has been usurped by the far right, so I too am taking it back. Im tirtzu ein zo agada. If you will it, it has no dream. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nomi, for those very interesting words on how you became a Zionist and how you came into this movement. Now, you really spoke about how being part of your Zionist youth movement affected your whole development as a Zionist. Do you think you could expand on how important it is for us as Jewish parents to get our children involved in youth movements that can teach them all aspects of the Zionist dream?
It's like a dream question, man. So here's what I would say. I also send my kids to Jewish day school, so I am a firm believer in the whole experience. But a Jewish youth movement teaches so much more. First, there's an education that, of course, you get from youth, from young. The people in a youth movement who run it are in their 20s. They have grown up in the movement. They've spent time in Israel. Sometimes, for most, there's a program for a year. Some have lived there. Some have come back. And they take what they learn. They see the ideals that they've grown up with, and they try and adapt them and bring them to the kids. They educate them. My son doesn't just go to camp to swim and to play sports. Well, hardly to swim and play sports. But he does know an awful lot about Zionism. He knows about Israel. He knows about progressive forces. He knows that Tel Aviv has been celebrated as the center for gay and lesbian work there. He knows about inequality. He knows how to discuss it. He knows how to bring it into conversation. And he became an activist. And, of course, the leadership skills that learning and doing and participating with friends in a worldwide youth movement is quite astounding. And as there are some people here, and as I look around, I see some smiles from some who I know share that experience, both as a parent and as a participant. And of course, they learn to Israeli dance and sing songs and all of those basics. And I think that in this day and age, many of our kids don't hear about Aleph Dalet Gordon or don't know about what happened in Basel, Switzerland with Herzl. But I believe that this is a place where they do learn that and can learn that and want to learn it.
Thank you. And to continue a little further on that note, we try to provide our children with a Jewish background and we send them to Jewish camping, but then they take the next step and as you talked about, they go to college. And I can remember as a college student, I was involved and there was a demonstration at my university. Louis Farrakhan came to speak and it was a big deal that the Jewish students felt that he was anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic and that you needed to have a place to go. But on the other side, there were the Jewish students who felt, you know what, this is dangerous. You could get hurt, this could get violent, maybe we should leave this place and not be involved. What do you tell your students? We're talking about, you were mentioning that there is a lot of different viewpoints that come on campus, and many of them are negative and anti-Israel. So how can we use progressive Zionists to face that?
Well, as I said, I mean, it's nuanced, and there's always choices, and I think that each experience is tough. And I think the challenges that our college kids face today are far more complicated and difficult than what you and I faced back then as well. I have a child, I'm pretty sure, that would jump at being at a demonstration, but I want to talk about the part of the Jewish role in demonstrations today, because that's what I talked about. It's complicated, and here's why it's complicated. You're right, someone like a Farrakhan gets up and speak, and we would all agree that he's anti-Semitic and what he's about to say is anti-Israel. And so back to my point about the issue, so what happens? So the Jewish groups get together and say, we need to form an umbrella group. We need to be there together to stand hand in hand. But then some things come out of the discussion that make me uncomfortable. What they're talking about is not what I talk about. It's not how I see my role. I'm not going to take what was the Farrakhan, for example, a discussion, and then turns into something about anti-Israel, whatever, and therefore say, as I have been at demonstrations, all Arabs are evil and everyone this, then it's not helping either side. And so you get stuck in the middle, and that's the concern. So we, as Jews, need to work on this umbrella organization. We need to work together. I mean, I will tell you, when I was involved at McGill, I was a founder of what was then called the Union of Progressive Zionists. The only time in Canada we ever said Z, UPZ. We used to say UPZ, but except for that, which is what has led into J straight U. And I was never attacked on Israel by Arab students, but we were attacked by Jewish students a lot. And that is most upsetting. And that's not helping either. So we need to work together. We need to talk about safe places and respect each other and work together and realize that, we're diverse too. And it's those difference of opinions. So when we look and say, well, this is what they said, well, they can turn around and say what we said back. There's always a he said, she said. What we really need to do is kind of stick together and work on those points, and that's where we're going to make progress. But it's not always easy.
Well, you were telling me earlier that with Amenu, there are different strategies that we can bring to these students to help them face these difficult issues at their schools. I was just watching a documentary talking about how at college campuses across the nation, there is this very anti-Israel BDS movement going on. There are Free Palestine movements going on, and we need to do something to help our children face these attacks. And again, we want to give them information and knowledge. And you and I were talking about how we should open up the conversation and make it broader.
Well, and I would say Habonim, Amenu, Habonim Dror are founders of something called the Third Narrative. And you can check that out on the website. And the Third Narrative is a group that really looks at those issues and tries to stay on top of the issues that are on campuses and give options and discussions for how to combat it. They've been particularly a lot of the boycott issue, the deeming issue, which is really mind-boggling, really, to think that you can have an English Studies Association that has decided that they are not going to allow Israeli English scholars in. Why? What's the relevance there? Now, clearly there's some sort of underlying group that's at play there. That is not acceptable. That is not acceptable. And so that has to be stopped. That has to be brought in. We looked last week, a few weeks ago again. The Presbyterian group again has been trying to get Caterpillar to pull out of Israel and groups like that. Again, why? What would be on the agenda of that group that would be their focus? Yes, I'm fighting for issues in Israel, that there's problems in Israel. But you know what? Compared to everywhere else, why is that the country that we're picking on? We're not pulling John Deere out of Syria so fast, but this is what we're going to look at. So just because I'm a progressive Zionist doesn't mean that I am not involved, not working, not committed to those issues. And that's what I said. There's a difference. There's a difference between being a progressive Zionist and being on the far left, on the anti-left. And Amenu is in this, and progressive Zionists are in this perfect spot where we can help work with that group as well as the right. We're looking in both ways. So that's also what's important here as well for you.
Thank you. I would like to address some questions that have come from the live stream. One person has written that I am concerned that you think that Israel is an occupying country. What other country wins territory in a war and is then called an occupying force? What other country wins and then is called that, especially when no one from the PA will sit across the table and negotiate with us?
So there's really two questions there, right? There's a question of what it means to be an occupier, and then there's a question about the PA. So first of all, there's always this complication about occupation for two reasons. One is that occupation is defined by United Nations law, and it's actually can be a quagmire for both sides. On the one hand, as an occupier, someone who has not annexed, you are not allowed to fix the roads. You are not allowed to help with certain issues. If you do those issues, ironically, you're breaking the law. If you don't do those issues, you're looked past that way. Here's the difference. Yes, we are occupying that territory, and I'll tell you why I don't have a problem saying it. Because we didn't annex it. If Israel was so confident in what they had done, then there would have been a little bit more of a change there for some of it. Now, some of it we have, and some we've given back. And there's still this talk of some of these areas of this territories. We gave, right, we're out of Gaza. We're out of Gaza. So it wasn't that I am the only one that was talking about the occupation. And it's not just me. I mean, I remember being part of a group the year the Intifada started called Dai LaKibush, which was against the occupation. It was a bunch of women who stood on busy corners in Jerusalem and held signs. We never spoke. We just held signs. Talking about it as mothers of soldiers, of people who were there. What was fascinating was that, again, it wasn't people that walked by and criticized us using the word occupation. They became very sexist thing and what they called us and the derogatory terms that went with it. But I think that no one is denying that this is a land that we're still talking about negotiation, right? Yes, this government is expanding settlements each and every day. But why are they doing that? They're expanding them because they're trying to prove that they belong, so it's more difficult to get back. But at the end of the day, when you look at any of the discussions where you're talking about Area B, Area C, Area A, there's still an area that we're talking about giving back. And the reason why is because it's not sustainable now. So if we're not just occupying the land and we're taking it over, then again, go back to what I talked about. I don't want to be a minority in my own country. Then it's not my country. And I'm not going to transfer, like some on the right would say, people to balance out the numbers. That, to me, is not, talk about an issue of human rights or talk about international law. So, so we're talking about differences here. We're talking about looking at areas in different ways. And so, yeah, I'm okay with that. Did I answer it both? Start writing it down.
Thank you. I think that many people have seen that the term of occupying, we gave land for peace, and when the wars in the 67 occurred, we took over these territories after we were attacked, and we conquered. And you're right, there were some areas that were annexed. We annexed Jerusalem, and we annexed parts of the Golan, and we did that for security. And then we gave back Sinai, and we have a cold peace with Egypt. And with all of that being said, you know, this has been such a problem for decades. Now, who can we negotiate with? We have offered to give back the West Bank and parts of the West Bank for up to 96, 98% of what they wanted with swaps. Now, who can we negotiate with? Because if we offer it right now, Abbas is going about it on his own to unilaterally declare a state, and he's going to the UN. So who is our partner?
So, as you know, as Rabin said, you don't pick your partner, right? You can't. It'd be nice. You have to. As I said earlier, I'm not running out to dinner with Abbas, but nor am I running out to dinner with Bibi. You know, sometimes I think that the two of them behave like my two sons, with a bit of passive-aggressive here, there, and everywhere. And I think that also what negotiators do behind the scenes, within closed doors, as part of a peace process or negotiations, and what they say publicly are two different things. I have been in some backroom negotiations with leaders both in the Arab world and actually as part of the Canadian government. And I can tell you that it takes a very brave person to sometimes do something that at first glance looks like it doesn't help all of your people. It takes a brave person. I mean, that's what we know. I mean, you know, the Yitzhak Rabin story, it comes up a lot. It comes up a lot, you know, for a bunch of reasons. He was a general. He had his problems, like many Israeli politicians. He has several lives. He could come back. He went there, but he did it. He made the peace. He, as you said, some pieces are colder than others. Some things work, you know. And at this moment in time, don't think that while all this is going on, there still aren't people talking, you know, in behind rooms. I was actually in Jordan once, in Aqaba, and and this is before peace, and some of the crown prince's horses escaped into Israel. Now, they knew who to call. They called them pretty quickly. They got the horses back. It wasn't like they stood on a border waving their hands saying, help, 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 and it wasn't like they snuck in. In the region, there is work going on all the time. It stops, it starts. You're right. You don't trust them, and you know, and we were having this discussion, and Abbas's actions, you know, changed, and they change a lot. So have our actions changed a lot. We say we're not gonna do settlements, and then we expand them again. We're not gonna go into these areas of war. We're gonna do the stuff. Well, will things go in? So it's not easy. It's gonna be bumps, and you know, So let me just say for a minute, you know, I didn't really talk about what, to me, a peace plan would entail. And really, as I said, that is a very different discussion. But I do want to say a few things. I do believe that a comprehensive peace plan will involve giving up land, and that some of that land will have some Jewish families on it. I do not believe that all Palestinians should be entitled to the right of return. Its implementation is impractical, and insisting on it creates an insurmountable obstacle to peace. Now, that's a big deal. And, you know, if you're talking in circles of peace and with Palestinians, that's a really big deal. But at the end of the day, I think that people that are serious about peace understand that. And there have been discussions, and I think they've worked all that out already. You know, we know that there will be Palestinian refugees who will be able to receive compensation, and they'll move into the West Bank. We know that there will be some families that do want to return to Israel for reunification. We know that. So, there are some big issues there, but I really think some of those have been worked out, and they kind of, they come in and out of a drawer depending on how things pass. And I do believe that even in terms of Jerusalem, for us, also one of the greatest, most sensitive issues, that there will be a resolution that's based on creative thinking. What that thinking is, there's a bunch of plans there too. I don't believe that we're going to have one. It's not going to be the Vatican City, a unified city where we're all going to be there. But, at the same time, you should know that in the last few months there has been a great push among Jerusalem Arabs to get their citizenship, which they refused to do, Israeli citizenship, for a very long time, and they're starting to understand too that there may be gains for them there. There may be gains because of the election that's coming up, and there are benefits that they haven't been entitled to that now they can be. So we each continue to find creative thinking. Each side continues to make mistakes. We come together, we go apart, we come together. And yes, some leaders will work better than others, but yes, people have walked away. There's no doubt. But at the end of the day, I still come back to, what's the choice? What is the choice?
To change the topic slightly, you had mentioned how the group that you founded at McGill University evolved into J Street University. Do you think that J Street has had any impact on moving conservative Americans towards supporting a two-state solution?
Well, I'm going to ask your question in a little different way. You said, do I think that J Street has worked to make conservative Jews come to a two-state solution? I would say that J Street in general has shown that there is another side to the Jewish community. It has shown that to people that are involved, and on Washington on the Hill, that there are other people that can door knock, and other people that can go, and other people that have opinions. I think it has showed to some of the disenfranchised Jews that I spoke about that there are people like them, maybe, who have understand the issues and have the verbiage that they just haven't yet acquired. And I think that it shows that, guess what? The Jewish community is diverse. Hey, there's something we didn't know. And so there can't just be one voice that speaks for all of us. And the other voice didn't speak for me.
Well, on that note, you came around to Progressive Zionism because it had a humanistic impact on you, and it talked about social justice and making social change. And how can we make the Zionist story something that shows how people who believe in Zionism also want to make life in Israel better for the Israelis and the non-Jews who live in Israel, talking about feminism and issues of women and violence against women, and how does Progressive Zionism deal with those issues?
Well, I hope that that's what I answered. One of the tenets that I really wanted to get across in my speech is that we're not new. We're old. We've been here since the founding of the state. We've been working on these issues for a long time, and somewhere along the way, what we were working on got hijacked, and to put is that we're not supportive of Israel. The names of the people that I mentioned, the NGOs that I mentioned, the fact that the Jewish Agency has now been looking to other groups to give some of the educational programs for summer trips to Israel. The fact that Noar HaOved is continuing to work with Habonim Dror to reach the youth both in Israel and here. The fact that some of Zach's counselors have made Aliyah and are living on Irbutzim, an urban kibbutz in Haifa. Those are amazing events, amazing activists that these people have moved to Israel to dedicate their life to working for this community, this ideal place, and And to me, that is the greatest success story. And to see working together, or to go to see Kibbutz Ravid, which is now a place that focuses on educational programs for youth across the country who come in for a week, or to hear that that there are groups that are now working with soldiers to really talk about the PTSD when they come out, because it's heavy and it's hard to know that. As I said, that, to read the books that have come out of Breaking the Silence, if you can. I don't know if there's one in English. I think there might be. But Breaking the Silence have put together books of the interviews that they've done with the soldiers. They have an entire book on issues that female soldiers face, both within the army and from what they're hearing on the streets. And to hear these people have come out and said, I don't want to be here. And if you go to Israel and you want to learn about these things, I encourage you to go visit these organizations, or go visit these communities, or as I said, or ask, or go on a trip to Israel, which looks at this part of Israel, which we used to not talk about or not go visit. And I said to you earlier today, the first time I went to Israel, which was in 1983, the program I was on never crossed the Green Line. Never. We didn't go visit places, except once, where we were sent by the Sachnut, and then we had a huge the Jewish Agency afterwards to say, why did we go there? Because the whole time, so if we had to get from Jerusalem and we were going up north, we didn't take that bus. We just didn't do it because we didn't believe in it. That was a long time ago now. But these groups have always, they've existed. We've been there, and we continue to work. And somewhere along the way, in the last little bit, I don't know, we've lost a little bit of this PR war, but we've always been there. These are, as I said to you when I looked at the Declaration of Independence, the issues that are there are the issues that we're still working on, we're still fighting about, we're still advocating for, and so are all those people.
Just to clarify for anyone who's watching, the Green Line was the border between Israel and the Arab countries before the 1967 war. So in case you are wondering, those are the lands that are in disputed areas. So the areas within Jerusalem have been annexed, and the areas outside of it are considered by some to be the occupied territories. I have another question from the internet. How do you ensure a majority Jewish state if you allow people from all different religions, nationalities to immigrate and become citizens?
Well, look, that's a good question, and one of the things I didn't talk about, but if you're following that Israel, has been a country for asylum seekers through Sudan and areas, and these people have not been treated nicely at all, and where they've been sent in, and it's upsetting to see. But at the same time, let's be honest. I talked about the percentage of what in Israel proper are still Jewish. We're not talking about a huge group of people. If every Baha'i in the world went to move to Haifa tomorrow, it still isn't going to make that much of a difference. And yes, there are some, non-Jewish, there's some Christians who live in Israel, and, we in the kibbutz movement went through a time in the 80s where we had volunteers on kibbutz who weren't Jewish and were coming, and what happens, and who was working in the fields, and some of them were married, and there were all those issues that went into play that have now come up a lot because of who's marrying them and what happened to non-Jews. But we're not talking about a huge percentage that tomorrow, all of a sudden, Israel is going to be a minority. It is important to note that the fertility rate of the Israeli Arabs is high. It is important to note that the fertility rate of the Haredi anti-Zionist community is also high. So sometimes in Jerusalem, I worry more about Zionists being the minority and we're still talking about Jews than we do, because those are numbers that are also, perhaps for a different discussion, that are high and troubling. But I'm glad to say that I'm not worried about that yet.
Okay. I wanted to speak to the 2014 Israel Democracy Index survey that just came out, and it reported that 86% of Israeli Jews are proud to be Israeli, and 65% of Israeli Arabs are proud to be Israeli, and that's up from 49% last year. So if you look at the dynamic and the makeup of the Jewish population and the Arab population in Israel, what does that tell you about the atmosphere and environment living in Israel?
First, it tells me that my progressive Zionist colleagues have done an amazing job in the last year in working on inequality issues. Secondly, and more seriously, I think it's an important fact to realize that even if tomorrow there was a Palestine in the West Bank, that not every Arab, Israeli Arab, is going to go there. They don't want to go there. While there's much work to do still, Israeli Arabs hold an important role and place in society, and they vote. They have their, they elected. There are government. There are towns with municipal governments. We have towns that have coexistence. People that work on that. People want to live there, and we want them to live there. I don't. I think that's what also makes Israel, and that's part of and what makes it special at the same time. And at the same time, does anybody watch Arab Labor? Have you ever seen Arab Labor? So I know so Arab Labor is one of my favorite shows ever. Arab Labor is an Israeli television show about an Israeli Arab Seinfeld, for lack of a better word, this neurotic man who really just wants to be an everyday Israeli. And his parents live in a village, and his wife, they're educated. He's a journalist. She's a psychologist. His best friend is Jewish, but he's now married to Mira Awad, the singer who plays his Palestinian girlfriend. I mean, it's just an hysterical show about the everyday issues that face people in a funny way, but of course in a thought-provoking a way, and looks at those issues. So yes, he just wants to be an Israeli. That's all he wants. He wants to live in the apartment with the shower that works, and he wants to be the parent of the first child born in the new year, so that it could, But then what happens? And here, like, if you're born on the January 1st, right, you get a prize. So in the hospital, there's two families that are about to give birth, and there was of course a Russian oligarch who has money that he's going to give to this family. So what happens? The Arab's born first. They seize the name. My friend Mohammed. How can Mohammed be the first person born in this year in this country? And what goes on, and the shenanigans that go on. So it's everyday life too. And not everything is political. It's just Chaim, and Chaim's a picnic sometimes. Life's not a picnic, and that's what you would find with all of this as well.
Well, Nomi, I just want to thank you for clarifying. I think that ending was a really good way to end, because it talked about how real life affects everyone and how we really are needing to see that there's a bigger picture. I want to remind everyone that this session has been recorded, as well as all of our past sessions, which you can watch them individually, you can watch them by yourself, you can watch them in a group. It could be the centerpiece of any Hadassah unit's program. And please share your feedback with us by completing an online survey. Your input helps us to create programming that is of interest to you and to your communities. Please continue this conversation on our website at www.hadassah.org/Zionism discussion, and on Twitter using the hashtag Defining Zionism. The next Defining Zionism will be Why I Call Myself a Zionist and Not Just a Lover or Supporter of Israel, presented by Gil Troy, Professor of History at McGill University.
2 in a row. I hope they're counting.
And a Shalom Hartman, Engaging Israel Research Fellow in Jerusalem. Gil Troy also was a former Mazkir of the Queens region of the New York Young Judea. And the date for this session will be Thursday, February 26, 2015. It will also take place between 7:30 and 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. Additionally, if you haven't already done so, please register for the entire Defining Zionism series to receive updates about all future programs. I would like to thank especially all of the volunteers and staff who have been involved in the Defining Zionism series, and I would like to let you know that without these people, the presentations would just not be possible. So thank you again, Nomi, for such an thought-provoking conversation. And lastly, I would like to thank you all for watching.
How we do.